My name is Max Czapowski, and this is Making an Indie Short. Let's go.
Bring some weed, I got a story to tell.
Besides raising good humans, which is still very much a work in progress, I've done some things that I'm really proud of. Getting my pilot's license, finishing my first Olympic triathlon, and those were hard, but they were both individual pursuits. Unlike this film, which took literally a small army of people, close to 60 people overall, to make it happen. And not just any people, but incredibly talented souls who are at the top of their game in their respective departments. So let's take it back to the summer of 2023. But before we do that, let's step back even further. I've never made a short film before, but I did used to have a video production company called Aperture One, and we did mostly corporate work, some culture videos, some interviews, some construction videos, things like that. During this time, I met some absolutely fantastic people who were some of the first people that I called to talk about this project. One of those people was Erica Duffy. She has a gear rental house called Camera Ambassador, and she's also the executive director of the Midwest Independent Film Festival. So I called her up because she's made some shorts before, and I wanted to pick her brain. But I had no idea where to even begin, so she asked me some questions. What is my objective with this short? What is my budget? How many days am I going to be shooting? And I didn't have answers to any of those questions, but it was calls like that started to help me get my mind around the scope of this project and what I should be thinking about. So every call at this point yielded more questions than answers, and I was completely lost, but I had to start somewhere. Meanwhile, in June, I started sending the script out to some of my friends and some of the guests that I've had on my podcast to sort of get their thoughts and their feedback. And the initial feedback was positive, but there's a big difference between getting positive feedback and taking actual concrete steps to get the project started. So one of the people that I spoke to was John Lair, who's become a friend. You would know him as the Geico caveman.
Neanderthal? Brian, your words are hurtful.
Okay.
But he's also an accomplished actor, a hilarious comedian, a great producer, and most importantly, a wonderful human being. So I called him and I said, John, I don't know where to even begin. What do I do first? And he said, look, before you even start thinking about talent, you have to think about how much of the script are you actually going to shoot? Because at this point, the script was something like 30 pages. And for reference, the film Gravity with Sandra Bullock, that script was 65 pages. The script for Alien was 77 pages. And so generally, it's a minute of film per page of script. And so I was looking with my script at more like a mini feature than a short film. But it was a little bit confusing because I also had the Russian translations in line with the English translations, and that made it artificially longer. But that aside, I also knew that I had too much dialogue. I knew that I had too much screen direction, which obviously I didn't know any better. So there were some revisions in order. The other thing I had to think about is where are we actually going to shoot? Because there's the obvious choice, which is Chicago, right? Because we're all here. But then there's also LA, where the majority of the talent is in terms of a deeper pool of cast and crew and just a more established filmmaking industry. So I had to think about all of those questions. John also talked to me about casting. My thought was, hey, if I find a casting agent that can help me with this, I should be in good shape. He actually told me, you know what? I cast most of my stuff myself. And it is substantially more work, but you just have to roll your sleeves up and get started. So when I got off the phone with John, my head was absolutely spinning. But I had to start somewhere, so I started with The Line. So let's talk about The Line. The Line is a common practice in production budgeting in which a literal line is drawn on a budget, and it's used to visually divide film crew positions that are paid according to a pre-negotiated fixed rate generally salaries. These are known as above the line crew. And then film crew positions that are paid according to variable, sort of hourly or daily rates. These are called below the line crew. Now, above the line people are responsible for creative direction, the financial backing, and the overall development and production. So these are the people that start long before the cameras start rolling and stay with the project all the way through to post-production. So that would be director, executive producer, the screenwriter, the producer, casting director, and the principal cast. These are the people above the line. Most of the people, as you can see above the line, are me, right? So no pressure, but I needed to round out the rest of that above the line squad. Below the line is broken into departments. As you can see, there are literally close to 20 departments, and this isn't even an exhaustive list. There are many, many more. But my priorities for the film were cast, the producer, and the director of photography. So I figured I would start with the cast. My thought was if I could get some solid names attached, then it would give the project credibility and it would help me get additional people like the producer and director of photography. So I started a spreadsheet called Talent, and I started reaching out to my old contacts from my Aperture One days to see if they could hook me up with casting agents. Now, casting agents, they were just catching up because COVID had just ended and they were all very busy. And because I'm an unknown filmmaker in the narrative world, they were nice enough to spend some time on the phone with me and give me some advice, which I could have absolutely used at that point, but they weren't willing to go out on a limb for me and put in a bunch of time and effort to try to find talent for this script, which at this point, again, was still way too long. So I decided to take John's advice and cast the film myself. I knew early on that I did not want to go through talent agents because the way talent agents get paid is a percentage of their client's earnings. And if their client is going to do a short film for free, then they are not going to get any money because their client's not getting paid. And so there's really no incentive for them to prioritize the script from an unknown director. I was hoping to find actors with whom the script would resonate, who would really, really be motivated to work on it and put in the effort. So I signed up for IMDb Pro, created a profile, and started looking. There are literally millions of people on IMDb Pro, and so obviously it was not going to be productive for me to go one by one down that huge list. However, I started coming up with some search terms, like putting USSR as a keyword, and that helped me to start narrowing down that list, because my thought was, hey, if they were old enough to be born in what used to be called the USSR, then they might be at least closer to the age I needed them to be to play the parents. Now again, going around the agent made things exponentially more difficult because the bigger the star, the less likely they are to have their info on IMDb Pro. So I started trying to find other ways to get a hold of them if their info was not on IMDb Pro. If they had a website and an email on the website, I started sending them emails that way. If they were on Instagram, which is an if, then I would try to DM them. And not everyone had their DMs open. And for those that did have DMs open, the response rate was generally something like 5%. For every 20 messages I sent out, I'd maybe get one reply. And so I also started submitting it to casting websites, casting networks, Backstage, even Playbill. Yes, the black and yellow brochures that you get when you go to the theater, and even Casting Frontier. I also submitted to Breakdown Services, which is a big player in the game, but they said that they wouldn't even post the job until February of 2024, which would have been 3 months before the shoot. And I remember thinking, man, if I don't have this thing cast 3 months before the shoot, I have way bigger problems. So I skipped that one, but I also started looking for Chicago acting studios and started to reach out to those to see if maybe they had any promising students. Now, if these people responded, that was not a guarantee of success. So if I could find them, then I would send them the script. And if they read it, and if they liked it, then they would have to be available and willing to do it for free. And if all of that actually happened, they also had to look the part. The parents had to be kind of close in age to each other, and the child ideally should have some resemblance to the parents. So in order to understand how old all of these people should generally be, I made a table of acceptable age ranges for the parents and for the child. And I realized very quickly that that was going to make a difficult task completely impossible. Then I did some research and realized that in some cases, the actors playing parents and children are way closer in age than we think. For example, in Alexander, Angelina Jolie played Colin Farrell's mom, but they are a year apart. In Forrest Gump, Sally Field played Tom Hanks' mom, and they are 10 years apart. And in fact, she even played his love interest in Punchline. In Rocketman, Bryce Dallas Howard played Taron Egerton's mom, and there was only an 8-year difference. In Orange is the New Black, Elizabeth Rodriguez and Dasha Polanco played mother and daughter, but in real life, there's literally only a 2-year age gap between them. So this made things a little bit easier for me, but it was still very difficult. I needed to find native Russian speakers who are nearly fluent in English, but it's obvious that English is their second language. They had to be the right age, etc., etc. Now, most of these people didn't go into acting. They went into, engineering jobs and things like that because of the same sort of mentality that we talk about in the film. So having said all of that, I wanted to start with the dad, which was a key role that would require real emotional range. So back to that Instagram message in July. I got a message back from an actor. This was the very first message I got back, and I literally ran across the terminal to Andy like, hey, I got a reply. And I remember getting a call from him on a random Sunday in July while driving back from dinner with the family. I saw this LA code and his name, and I went absolutely nuts. Now, he could not do the film, but his call was a massive shot in the arm, and he connected me with multiple people that I could talk to as far as, playing the leads. So the first person that I cast in the film was for the role of Vadim, and his name is Oleg Stefan, who is an incredibly accomplished Russian actor born in the Ukraine. Now, when I originally approached him, he said, he would love to do the film. He loved the script. I did not realize that he used to live in the US. And so when I saw that he was based in Moscow, I was like, well, there goes that opportunity. Once I learned that he still has family in the US, that was a very easy first yes. The incredibly talented actress that I got to play the role of Alina is Irina Dvorovenko, who was born in Kiev, Ukraine, and actually a principal dancer with the National Opera and Ballet Theater of Kiev. And after she moved to the United States, she joined the American Ballet Theater, where she rose to become a principal dancer, which is an incredible honor. And then after she retired in 2013 from ABT, she started her second career in acting and has had some unbelievable performances in Flesh and Bone, The Americans, and many other shows. And in fact, very soon, she will be in And Just Like That, which is the sequel to Sex and the City. So super lucky to have had her on the project. And to play Sasha, the son, we found Yuri Sardarov, who is half Georgian, half Armenian, and who moved to the US, specifically to the Chicago area, with his parents when he was 2 years old. You would recognize him from Chicago Fire, where he played Otis for 8 seasons, and he now lives in LA, but I got connected to him through Danielle Bernstein, whom I will introduce you to shortly. But he is a really wonderful actor, very talented, and I am so fortunate to have had him on the project. I still needed to find a producer. It is so much harder to gauge how good a producer is because you can't see their performances like you could with cast. You cannot see their work like you can with a director of photography. And yet they are responsible for dozens of items, from documentation to the budget, from crew to talent management. They're the liaison with the vendors, they're the location manager, they do the insurance paperwork. And the smaller the project, the more of these hats they wear, and they wear them simultaneously, and they juggle everything, and they have to prioritize incredibly well. So my requirements were the producer has to be local, they have to have some experience, which means that they have connections with crew members and other people. They are available, and they're not cost prohibitive, right? So I took a two-pronged approach. I started looking at shorts that have won awards and looked at the producers who worked on those films. And then I also started to call around my network to try to get recommendations. You know, the challenge is that my network happens to be more in the commercial world. So the type of corporate work that I used to do, smaller crews and larger budgets. And I needed not just people with narrative experience, but people who are also used to maybe larger crews and much, much smaller budgets. I talked to the producers from my past life at Aperture One. None of these were available, but I started a list of producer recommendations, and the more people recommended somebody, the more checks they got next to their name. One of the names that kept coming up was Mary Kay Cook, an Emmy award-winning producer with an incredible resume. I connected with her back in August, and she was not available, but she connected me with Danielle Bernstein. And she said that I would be lucky to have Danielle, and she proved to be right time and again. And thus began the Danielle chapter of my life. Danielle worked on all the Chicago shows for Dick Wolf, Chicago Med, Chicago PD, Chicago Fire, and she is an incredibly good juggler who wears multiple hats very well. And not only did she run effectively the entire project for me, but she also connected me with Yuri to play Sasha, as well as the majority of our below the line crew. So, speaking of below the line, let's talk about everyone else that was involved. So if you recall, there is above the line staff and below the line staff. Now, below the line is organized into a number of departments that all come together seamlessly to bring a motion picture to life. This graphic is not by any means all-inclusive or exhaustive, but it'll give you an idea of the people involved, and I'm highlighting the positions that we actually had engaged on the invite. Now, I'm gonna do a deep dive into some of these areas later in the video series, but I wanted to talk about some of our department heads and explain at a high level what they do. So, Sue Kaufman, our costume designer, has worked on the Dick Wolf shows, Chicago Fire PD, Chicago Med. She's done a number of films. Then we have our director of photography, Christian Hinz. So Christian, as a DP, is responsible for the overall look that matches the vibe that I would like to have as the director. Aaron Holden Jr., our prop master. Props are basically a fourth character in this film, and Aaron has helped to bring those to life in a way that honestly is just unbelievable to me. Everything from the photo album to the record to even fake ice cubes in the iced tea glasses to make sure that everything looks fantastic. Aaron is absolutely the man. Mary Tallman, she's the script supervisor or scripty. So Mary was by my side the entire time we were shooting, and she makes sure that when there's something on a take that is off, like if an actor is looking one way when they say a line and the next take they're looking another way when they say a line, we won't be able to cut between those two takes. So she ensures that everything is done in a way that gives it continuity. She's incredible. Desi Wolf, who's the set decorator, she also worked on the Dick Wolf shows and a number of other movies. She is the person responsible for creating these worlds, for building these worlds. What that means for us specifically is that she literally furnished from scratch all of the rooms where we shot. She provided the artwork, the plants, literally everything. And she works very closely with Aaron, our prop master, to make sure that these worlds are furnished, they look believable. Blair Scheller, our sound mixer, the man himself. He's worked obviously on the Dick Wolf shows, but also Pirates of the Caribbean, A River Runs Through It, a number of other shows. He's the guy in charge of the sound department, making sure that we're capturing the dialogue, but also those in the know, room tone, which is where literally nobody moves for close to a minute after we shoot a scene to make sure that we capture the ambiance of the room, the ambient sound. Dorothy Pabian, our hair department head. She is responsible for doing everyone's hair and make sure that it looks consistent from take to take. Alma Izquierdo, the makeup department head, she's worked on a number of films like The Dark Knight, Man of Steel, again, the Dick Wolf shows. She ensures that our actors are looking their most fabulous. Phil Evans, my first AD, first assistant director, who was literally my right hand during the shoot. Not only could he run the entire film set, and he did for the first couple of scenes while I was still getting my sea legs, but he also put together the entire shooting schedule for every single day. He was in charge of making sure that we remained on that schedule, and he worked with me, the DP, and the other heads of department to ensure an efficient shoot. So as you can tell, it really did take a small army to bring this project to life. I've talked about a few of the people, but there are so many others, countless others, that played such a pivotal role in making my dream a reality. I will talk more in detail about some of their roles later in this video series, but now it's time to wrap. My name is Max Czapowski. This is Making an Indie Short. Thank you for watching. Talk to you next time.